But today we're going to be talking about finding your niche in the music industry and staying true to your vision. And we've got an incredible panel of experts here who are going to talk us through that. So for those of you that are used to my lessons, you're gonna be used to this question. So I'm gonna ask you each to introduce yourselves and share who you've currently got on repeat, either a song or an artist that you've currently got on repeat. So we'll start with you, Ellie.
I'm so simple at the moment. I love Chapel Rowan.
Ah, nice.
I'm absolutely obsessed.
Nice. And can you share more about your background as well?
Yeah, so I was brought up in Doncaster. I went to school here. I left to go to university to Liverpool, where I found, I used to listen to like local radio stations. I used to listen to BBC Radio Sheffield, and there was always like new artists on. And so I was always really obsessed with that. And then when I got to university, I thought, I'm going to be a radio DJ. And then realised that I didn't have the gift of the gab for being a radio DJ. But I thought, I really want to work in music. So I started working in the venue and gave my time for free. That then moved on to being A&R for Island Records whilst I was a student. And at that time, there was a lot of bands coming through. One of them was the Zootons, who wrote Valerie, which is the Amy Winehouse song that most people probably know it as. My boss didn't think they were very good, but anyway, interesting. So yeah, then I went to be a proper A&R. I was actually based in Northern A&R actually first in Manchester, working for Polydor Records, and around the time that the Arctic Monkeys came out. So I was very fortunate. I saw the Arctic Monkeys to very few people, 3 people. Saw them in Wakefield, Sheffield. I saw them in Manchester. I saw them in Wigan. I saw them in everywhere, and no one wanted to sign them at the time. And then after that, I went and worked in London at Universal. Did that so I was there for 7 years, and then I've been managing now for about 15 years, and have managed a vast array of people, everything from someone who had like 4 million followers across all social platforms to who kind of built his audience online, to guitar bands, to composers who've had music on film and TV like Silo. So I kind of have a pretty good understanding of how the whole industry is put together, but also across genre. And at the moment I am working on a project that is very close to my heart, which is raising money for Palestine, and we're going for Christmas #1 with a Palestinian lullaby. So I'm currently working on that as a kind of side project on top of music management. So yeah, thanks so much.
So I'll start with my songs on repeat, but I'm not sure if anybody will know them. It's a band who came and did a live recording at our studio called Pyramid Park, and I just love the stuff that they're doing. So do go check them out. Their new album, Cyclones and Silence, is really raw and, raw in the sense that it was written out of an emotional place for the artist. So I'm loving that at the moment. My name's Christina Jones. I'm the founder and studio manager at Beckview Studios. We're a residential recording and music production studio in Scarborough. We obviously do the whole recording studio thing. So we track, mixing, mastering, and also on the non-musical side, because our studio is a niche industry in Scarborough. We also do a lot of voiceover work. So we work with actors, authors. We're a Penguin approved Random House audio studio. So we work with obviously big audiobook companies. We also facilitate podcasts, but I would say music is the lifeblood and the reason why we got into it. But obviously all the other stuff just helps to, we just have to do it. And not just have to do it, we enjoy doing it. We also have a music show podcast that we collaborate with Yorkshire Coast Gigs. They're a CIC, who go and do interviews and reviews of local gigs in the sort of Yorkshire coast region. We sort of cover from Hull right up to sort of, I would say, the Tees Valley area, and then inland through to Leeds and Sheffield. That's all hosted on our YouTube channel, and we've had some really excellent viewing figures for that podcast, getting promoters, live musicians playing in the studio, and just sort of like covering industry tidbits across the area. And we also run live sessions, and I would say that's probably one of our favourite things to do. We have an in-house videography team. Everything we do is recorded live, mixed live, often live streamed. We get the lighting right, it's moody. Sometimes we have an audience in, and that's an area that we really enjoy, but we can talk about that maybe later on in the conversation. But that's me.
Right, okay. Hey, I'm Danny. What am I listening to at the moment? Like a couple of things I've got on repeat. I've got like English Teachers, like album on repeat at the moment because I'm vibing off that, and like new like Lady Leisha track. I just like, it's a vibe. It's good. You check it out if you haven't checked it out. Yeah, yeah. So like, I'm an artist and producer and like songwriter. Started out as a beat maker. I was working like, as you can tell, like my accent's pretty hybrid. I've moved around a lot. I was in London for a while and worked in making like beats and stuff for like Boy Better Know. Worked with like Jammer, BBK, and that was pretty much all I wanted to do, just be a beat maker. I was like, yeah, I'll just be a beat maker. Like I love like loads of my mates spat, so I was just like, and like wrote like loads of bars, and like I'd write some bars for my mates, and I'd be like, don't tell, like it's fine. I'm happy with instrumental. It's fine. And and that was pretty much it for a while. And then I met this like jazz artist and this poet called Benjamin Zephaniah. And he was doing this mad, like, well, not mad, he was doing poetry over like jazz. And I was like, how do I get into that? how do I do that? And like, and luckily there was this like mentorship thing, and he like was able to take me under his wing, and he taught me how to write better. And that kind of like started me off on like a bunch of things. I wasn't just like a instrumentalist anymore. I was like, went into this world of like songwriting, and yeah, that kind of threw me into a whole different world where I got picked up by like Sony Music Publishing, Warner Chappell and BMG, and I write for those. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm a songwriter now. And then like, so that's pretty much like where I started. And then like, I went uni, met a bunch of people, and then like met this guy called Andy who goes under the name Mr. Scruff, and yeah, and he was like, no, you need to be trying doing all this electronic stuff with like jazz and stuff, and he introduced me to like Giles Peterson, and I was just like, oh man, this is crazy, and then I like started molding my kind of sound to that, and then yeah, and then like started releasing with like Ninja Tune and Rough Trade, and cheers, yeah. Then I did a track with Cold Cut, which was Lush, and then yeah, and then like yeah, I wanted to make like my like live project, well, my like producer DJ project into like a live project, so I roped in 3 of my mates. And then yeah, we became like 4-piece, and yeah, that's pretty much what I do. Like write songs and try and do my thing. But I like doing other stuff. I got into like writing music for like theatre. I composed for my first opera last year, which was like debuted in Luxembourg. Wrote some stuff for film. Got some stuff on like Prime, Netflix. Yeah, that's me.
Nice. Lovely. So you've been introduced to our incredible experts, and now we're going to get into our conversation. So, Ellie, you mentioned that you have been in management for some time now. What has that journey been like in terms of building your own companies, from working with organisations and being a part of kind of a cog in the wheel to then now being your own thing?
I think, when I worked at Universal, it was very much me bringing artists that I believed were going to be successful for the label. I mean, there was times when I brought things in that I just loved, and I knew they would never sign it, but I just loved it and I had to bring it in. But there was things that I brought in that was like, I loved, but I also knew could work. So I signed Ellie Goulding and I signed a band called White Lies, and at that time, it was very much like with the Arctic Monkeys, I brought them in, and it was just, I remember ringing around all my bosses and everyone saying, no, 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 like, not going to sign them. And I was just like, okay. And then they signed to Domino, and I remember they did an ex-America deal, which means that it was an American, Domino didn't sign them for America at the time. And Interscope, who were the sister company for our company, Polydor, offered them £1 million deal, Arctic Monkeys, and the head of the label popped me in the room and was like, what do you want? And I was like, well, I want this, this and this. And I was on 12 grand at the time because I was in Manchester, and I was like, I want this money. And they were like, yep. I was like, okay. I was like, but I think what I really got bored of there was just how I was bringing in things that I really believed in, and there was just a lot of no's, and it just really started hitting my self-esteem. So then it was like, I always was really jealous of all the managers I was working with. So I was working with some incredible managers like Ian McAndrew, who manages Arctic Monkeys now, and James Sandham, who managed White Lies. And I was really lucky to kind of realise what they were capable of and what they were doing, and I thought, wow, they're really, really bright people. And the complexities of management, I think, kind of pulled me in. So I went to start my own company with a it was me and another woman. We started managing producers and mixers actually at the beginning, because ultimately I knew that from an artist's point of view, it was going to take a long time to break something and actually build something. So we started that, and then I took on a guy called Bill Ryder Jones, who is an extraordinarily talented guy, and he was signed to Domino. He'd played on Fireside by Arctics as well, but he used to be in a band called The Coral, which you might know the song Dreaming of You. So yeah, I started managing him, and the business wasn't really there at the beginning. It was very much kind of building his business. But I think, I'm aware of time, sorry. But I think the big thing is that I realised that I just wanted to have my own voice in the room and make their own decisions, and really make sure that things were being thought of, like that I didn't, and being respected and valued, because a label, everything's about numbers. And I didn't want it to be about numbers. I wanted it to be about, can we make this work, and can we make a sustainable business for the artist? So yeah.
Yeah. And Christina, you mentioned that you're quite niche in Scarborough, and being a co-founder often means taking up space that has not been occupied and being the first, which it sounds like where you're based, you are the first. What has the process been like co-founding Beckview Recording Studios?
Okay, so it's myself and my husband actually have co-founded the studio, and we're not the first studio in Scarborough. Obviously, there's lots of project studios. There's lots of home studios. There are some wonderful people doing incredible sound design in that space. But I would say on the scale at which we operate, we are probably the only one there, and certainly with the capacity that we have, and the size of the live room and the experience that we have. So, but there are other places to go to, and I think that's great, because I'm all about connecting those dots between all the other spaces. And it's like, we're not the cheapest studio, at all in our area. There are other, so it depends upon budget, it depends upon outcomes, and it's great that we've got other options for people. And I always try and sort of like link in the best fit for people when they come to us. My background isn't actually in the music industry. Sorry. My first love actually was the theatre, and that's what I studied at university. And very quickly realised that that was not actually what I wanted to do, but developed and gained a very strong interest in arts management, especially live events. So I would always volunteer to just, steward every single live event that was happening at uni and like everywhere. I've worked on box office, I've done a lot of events management. Then I kind of moved in, I worked in our local council in tourism, but that was again about marketing, events, coordination. So this was always my love. I went and did a master's in arts management. So facilitating that side of the industry is where I really fit. And obviously there are lots of transferable skills between, live music, live theatre. The transferable skills are completely there. My husband is the engineer and producer. So he's the one that loves the music, loves making music, loves teaching, loves sitting behind a mixing desk and fiddling with all the knobs, buying gear, a lot of gear. It's a problem, yeah, it's a problem, which is why he brought me in to say no. But he'd been working at university teaching music technology for a long time. The campus where we were at, which was in Scarborough, moved down to Hull, and then it was like over an hour's commute every day to do that. So alongside doing that, he was building up more of his production work on that side of things. And we had a home studio and we built it up. And he got to a point where he was like, I can't manage this on my own. Admin's not his favorite task. So I kind of stepped in to that side of things, very much, I think, initially in a supportive role, but then within that, finding more and more my niche. And when we came to build our studio, which we did, we found a building, we built it from the ground up. We didn't physically do it. I had builders help me do it. But when we were designing the entire process, because of this live background, I was like, I want a live room that's big enough that we can have small, intimate performances in here. And so that was like a really important element to what we're doing. So it's being able to find elements of what we really love and really enjoy and just sort of pressing into that. And I'm also finding that with a lot of the ideas that we have for the new products, new services, we'll give it a go. And I'm kind of the mindset, like, if it's gonna fail, let it fail quickly, when it's not very expensive and when we can get out, or when we can learn a lot from it. So we're very open to just like giving something a shot, collaborating with someone, trying that out in a kind of low risk environment, and then if it works, trying to develop it. So sorry, I've gone off a little bit off piste from your question, but I hope that's helpful.
And now, Danny, you've already mentioned some of your pathway in terms of finding yourself as an artist, and different people that you've collaborated with. And you're an electronic artist. I mean, amongst other things, as you've already expressed. But electronic music doesn't have the clearest pathway. How have you found navigating the music industry, aside from all the things that you've already mentioned? Like, how have you found navigating the music industry and finding your feet?
Yeah, it's not one straight line, I don't think. So it's one of those where I didn't really know, like, I made like electronic music, like I used like, FL, like Cubase, like used like Reaper for a bit. I used like used Logic and Ableton. So it was like all those different like stuff. But like I love different parts of them. So like when I first started like making like electronic music, and you know when you're like first using it, like you're putting samples together and you're like, oh my God, this is the best track I've ever made. and then building on that, but like going into it, like I said it, I think it was easier for me like initially, because like loads of my mates were like writing bars and stuff, and but no one, like literally hardly anyone, was like a beat maker, and like I can't spit, so I was just like, I'm gonna go for that one, and just like ended up using like FL Studios in like the community center, and just like kept on like making beats, and because they were so good, they made my beats sound even better, and like and then that's how like I kind of got started, and then like people would do it when they were like battling and stuff, and like during cyphers, and then like my beats just kept on like, and then it ended up like some of my beats were ending up on like One Extra and stuff, so it was like, all right, maybe I can make this work. But like it was always just like to a means to an end, because like my mates wanted it, but then when they like got big producers and stuff like that, I kind of like found my own way, and that was when like looking at hybrids like jazz and stuff like that, and seeing what other people were doing, like checking out like Flying Lotus, what he was doing, and other artists who were like fusing the two and putting electronic music with like live instrumentation, and I was just like, all right, that's sick. Like how does that work? And I play a few different things anyway, so like jumping in on stuff like that and like building that, and then like being a songwriter, that kind of like I had all these kind of strings to my bow. So like songwriting, beat making, I can like play a bit, muddle my way through a bit. That's the best thing about electronic music. You can edit or delete, or put it to grid. So I had all that going on. So I found my way through was like easier, because I had like, if someone was like, oh, we've only got the hook, or we need a hook, I could be like, I could try and help with that. Or, oh, we've got kind of a melody, but we need like drums. And I was like, oh, I could do that. And I think it was just like, and I didn't say no to anything at the time. Well, yeah, at the time, I was thinking, do I say no to stuff? But like, I was like, pretty much like, okay, I want to do this. Oh, I'm going to jump on that. I'm going to jump. Like, I was literally like for everything. And like, that's given me so many different opportunities. Like, I even got opportunities to like mix and master, and like ended up doing that for like 2 years. And that was great, because suddenly like my beats were like sounding like dope. But I was like, oh, I thought they sounded decent before, and then listening to them then and listening to them now and being like, ugh, and just like hiding them on like my hard drive. But like, but yeah, I think it's all about like having different, like for me, it was all about having different like strings to my bow, making sure that like I said yes to pretty much everything. I'm pretty easy to work with, like, so I think that helped as well. That like I was no trouble. Just put me in a corner somewhere, and yeah, I think like it's definitely not a straight line. If I was doing, and because I was doing like kind of hybrid electronic music, I wasn't doing like house, I wasn't doing stuff like that. Like I'd say the most mainstream thing I was doing at that time was like kind of like UKG, maybe a bit of like dubstep here and there, but like it was pretty much that. But most of the time it was just like adding electronic music to traditional music to make it sound either like different or like enhancing it. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. I think what I've caught from you all is that you've all put yourselves forward and put yourselves out there in order to find your niche. Would you all agree with that? That it's definitely involved a lot of like putting yourself out there and not being afraid, and kind of not being afraid to fail, but then also being ready to learn. And finding your niche has the connotations of going against the grain. So what tools and like really like putting yourself out there is kind of going against the grain. What tools and mantras, and anyone jump in when they feel like they have an answer at this point. So what tools and mantras did you have to help you stay the course? And in the face of challenges, what was it that kept you, like, gave you the mettle to be like, okay, I'm gonna champion that artist. I'm gonna, take on that project. I'm gonna try this new thing. What was it that kept you going?
I think at the beginning was delusion. Pure and utter delusion. Like, I just kind of, I don't know, I just had this like belief that, I remember I was also promoted for a bit. I didn't like it, so I did it for like a year, but I remember going for this promoter's job. It was between A&R, and I remember going, I'm going to get that job. I just was like, I'm going to get that job. It's my job. And I just had this like utter belief at that age where it was just like, okay, it's going to happen.
So you're not talking about manifestation and confusing it with delusion?
Well, at that time there wasn't really the word manifestation. It was kind of like, wasn't really a thing I mean, I'm old, so it's, well, 43 it is old, but yeah, in the grand scheme of things, so, people in the audience, but I think, I think it was delusion, but then I think it was also curiosity. I was curious about so many things. And I think that everything I've ever managed has been through curiosity. I was saying to someone the other day, it's like, there's a lot of managers who just do one like genre or one world and then just go, okay, I'm going to get really good at that one world. But I never did. I was just like, I want to do something new and have a new challenge. And I think that for me was like hugely important to kind of learn. I just really like learning, and I like understanding, and I like understanding concepts, and I like to understand complexities. And so I think it was just, I mean, look, there's been times when I've had absolutely doubt, like massive amounts of doubt. And it's not that I haven't had that, like, but I've just always been like, okay, push back through, or something's happened there. It's like, okay, that's pretty bad, but it might be that it's not great for like 3 months, but then I find a new path and I find a new thing that I definitely want to do. And I think it's about being true to yourself about what actually you really enjoy and what the process is. Like I always say, if you like something 80% of the time, then do it. The 80% is the key. And if you like that 80%, then you're going to carry on doing it. So yeah, and realizing what that 80% looks like and what that 20% looks like. Is that 20% going to outweigh that 80%? As in, is there going to be big things in that 20% that you don't like that actually is just going to like, do you know what I mean? So you just got to be really conscious of those things. So yeah, I think just being aware of your strengths as well. Like I did a Gallup test recently and a Colby A test, which are both a lot of people in big corporate companies do. My ex-partner was a CEO of a company, and he said I got everyone to do it. And my top strength is strategy, which I thought was quite funny. And I was like, okay, this is why I'm a manager. And Colby A, it was like, I really like to understand things to the nth degree before I make action. And I thought, yeah, I do. I really like to know what's happening and how it makes sense and what it is. So I think, yeah, and also I like for me, it's like I did my Myers-Briggs test, which is I'm an ENFJ, which is an extrovert, intuitive, feeler and judger, and so which is a teacher basically, and I guess is like that's what they call it, and I think it doesn't surprise me that I'm in the role that I'm in, I guess, but like working out what your strengths are is I think the key to kind of moving forward.
Yeah, you've got to have sort of a passion for what you do, definitely. And like certainly within the creative industries and, within the music industry as well, because, there's a lot of things that might knock your confidence and either intentional or unintentional things that people say, comments. I'm not the creative, I'm not the mix engineer, but like, for instance, it's part of who you are. We've had to learn the hard way because I'm married to, you know, my business partner. So he, you know, we've learned the hard way that he cannot ask me for a mix opinion after 9 p.m. at night because I hate it, even if it's the best thing he's ever done. I love it the next morning, but, you know, catch me when I'm brushing my teeth and it's awful. So, like, there's a lot of things like that. Catching your moment, I suppose, for asking for feedback. But yeah, you've got to have a passion for what you do. And I do love this industry, actually. But what I personally love more is people, and helping people realize their vision and their musical vision. And that is, you know, the artists that we work with, but that is also the team as well of creatives that we have, and trying to foster, how do we develop and grow this team? How do we niche and work into certain areas? How do we then bring in other creatives to facilitate parts of the process that we maybe don't have that skill sets in? Part of our studio's ethos is that we've got a great big vintage mixing desk. We've got a 24-track 2-inch tape machine. We're about the analog. We're about the real instruments, the real people. The space in the live room is big because we want to be working with artists who are gigging and need those lines of sight. That's all important. The way we've decorated the space is to help people feel relaxed in it. You don't always feel like you're walking into a studio. So many people comment that they feel like they're walking into a living room. And more than that, they're walking into my living room, you know, and we're welcoming them, because as with any recording studio, you can capture it well. I want to capture a good performance well, you know, that's what, and that's so much of that is about the person and about them feeling right. That also is helpful. It's a driver for then, you know, meeting people. So I'm well placed in our business because I actually enjoy things like this, meeting people, chatting to people. Don't get me wrong, it is a skill. It is a skill that comes with time and practice as well. So if any of you are like, I just don't like speaking to people and I don't want to do it because I feel awkward, I would say you probably need to do it more and more then, because it will become easier as you go along. Yeah, but passion, definitely, and being open, a bit like what Danny said, to lots of different opportunities. Just saying yes, even if you're not 100% sure, because sometimes your niche finds you as well through those opportunities of saying yes, through opening those doors. So, yeah.
All right. Okay. Said it so beautifully over there, both of you. Yeah. So, like, for me, it was like I got a bit of like tough love, which was horrendous. But it was like, now it's okay. But I would put it totally differently. But like, so, you know, I was really excited to like be making this hybrid music, of course. And I was listening to a lot of like artists, like on like Ninja, on Brownswood, and I was like, this is great, and like kind of crafting my stuff. And I remember asking for feedback. Oh yeah, only ask for feedback if you're willing to take it. Horrendous. So like, and I was like, what do you think about my music at the moment? And like certain artists who I really respected was like, you sound like a bit of a tribute act, mate. And I was like, and I was just like, oh no, it's just all about my like influences. And he was like, yeah, but I can't hear you. And I was like, I'm going to take that last bit. Everything else I'm going to bin off, and I hate you. No, but like, but yeah, it took like hearing something like that to be like, do you know what? That guy's actually right. Like, I sound like everyone else.
Saying like, you know, like good artists like borrowed.
Yeah,
it's one of the great steals.
Exactly. So like, but like now, like when I hear my music, I'm like, I recognize myself in it as well, which is key, I guess. And I think it's easy to get caught up in like, oh, but I love this artist so much, and
It does hold that's good actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, every influence, you know, it's good to have like influences, but definitely like I'd say like one of the big things for me is like definitely like keep your own voice. Like it doesn't matter how much you borrow, how much you take. It's like it's like, you know, person like my nan's into cooking, right? So like when she talks about like cooking, she's always talking about like, and I put my own signature on it, and I'm like, that is it, Nan. You put your own signature on it. So like when I like make music, or even when I'm like writing for other people, I don't go wild when I'm writing for people. By the way, I like, you know, put a little dash in and be like, oh yeah, that's so people will know that like maybe I've written that tune. But like most of the time, it's just all about like, yeah. And understand what kind of an artist you want to be as well. I think that was like a big thing for me. Like, you know, I know exactly where I sit. Like, I get played on Six Music, maybe a bit of Radio X. I doubt I'll be on Radio 1, like the sort of music I create, the sort of way that I write, and like the sort of labels that I resonate to and around are like indie labels, and that's okay. And being okay with that and understanding like that's where I sit and that's where like my kind of niche is. I'm not a pop artist. I'm like I've written for pop, but like it doesn't like kind of feed me the way that like other music that I create feeds me. So I know where I sit. I hope that makes sense.
I guess, you know, it's a really interesting question, that, because I think so many people assume that a manager will kind of, you know, get you to the place that you believe that you should be. And, you know, I've got this metaphor, which I think's really spot on, is that, you know, at the end of the day, the artist is driving the car. I'm just a navigator. I'm just there to navigate. So I'm there to say, yeah, you know what, that's a great idea. Maybe this is a better idea. You know, you're a collaborator with the artist. And so, yeah, there are perks, I guess, in the sense of like, you know, a manager will take off some of the strain and the stresses of like admin and bits like that. But I think the big thing to understand of like when the time is right to have a manager is when you've got something actually moving. Like a manager is just not going to fix you. They're not going to take you and go, I'm going to make you big, unless unless they're like a Svengali, like a Simon Cowell, and you know they've put together a pop artist and pop band. But ultimately, it has to be you driving that car. And you know, the amount of people. I mean, I took on a guy called Joel Sonny, who was like, you know, already moving in the right direction, you know, massive amounts of streams, massive amounts of like socials, and, you know, it was kind of like, okay, you've already got this moving. I can just add into this and kind of help, you know, bridge the gaps that I'm missing. So bringing in like, you know, like he didn't have a mailing list. Why did you not have a mailing list? I mean, Christ, he had 4 million followers and no mailing list. It was like, oh. So like things like that, it was kind of just cleaning up all the things that he hadn't kind of done. But I think, you know, if you're finding a manager at the early stages, like it's finding someone who's really just passionate, who cares, who is willing to like learn on the job, who's willing to understand something very early, who's willing to kind of go and be like, I'm going to go and network for you and go and learn, you know, how this works and how the bigger picture is connected into, or what your aims are. Like, what are our aims? What are we trying to achieve? And I think someone just passionate and organised and on it and cares. And I think, but I also think, you know, at the end of the day, driving your own car is the most important thing. And you just can't like even thinking deludedly that like a manager's going to come and like, you know, make you big. You'll make yourself big. What a manager will do is put the cherries on. They will be the one that like goes, oh, you know, with Joel, it was like, okay, he never even thought about live. We got a great live team. We got, you know, him selling out around the world, tickets around the world. You know, we got mailing list and used OpenStage, and, you know, it's things like that that were like vitally important to kind of build on top of. you know, maybe when I was younger, I'd build the foundations, but now I'm at a level that I don't build the foundations. Sometimes you will find a manager who's young who wants to build the foundations with you. But, you know, you have to be the one that's like, you know, I was really early. I don't know if you know this girl, but she's amazing, called Alessi Rose. And I had some writers at the time and they went in with her. And I mean, she's just been on tour with Tate McRae and Dua Lipa, but she's an amazing writer, like an incredible artist. Alessi Rose. And she's got such a really good lyric. Like she has her own thing that she wants to say. And she's incredible. But I remember hearing her for the first time and being like, she's going to be a superstar. And I helped her get a manager, but I knew from that day, like, but she knew. She was like, once I've got my music, I'm going to go on TikTok. I was like, you know, you need to do 3 to 4 a week. That's the thing. She's like, no, I'm doing it every day. She's now got 140,000 people following her on Instagram. And I saw her from like literally like 100 people following her, you know, and she had the support. The first supporter was a Nottingham BBC introducing. And, you know, it's just incredible to see that. But she was so, I am going to do it. She had such conviction. And I was like, if I'm going to manage someone, they have to have conviction. If they haven't got conviction, I'm not convicted. I'm not going to have conviction. So they've got to have it. They've got to have that drive. They've got to have that, like, I want this. I'm going to be massive. And then you just kind of, you work together to make it happen. Yeah.
I've got a question, man. What would everyone's advice be on overcoming doubt or fear in the music industry?
It's a very good question. Yeah, it's a great question. I think you've got to push through. That's the most important thing. It's like doing one thing a day. So like it's starting to learn how to like just do. So whether that's like, you know, if you're writing, it's just turning up even when the writing isn't working. Like that's what writer's block is real. It is real. Seeing it with so many of my friends who are, you know, incredible talents, but the writer's block is real. But like just turning up, try and turn up at the same time every day. To do half an hour at first, where you just like, even if it's just writing down ideas. And what happens is your brain starts going, okay, this is the time to be creative. And you're creating your space to kind of do that. You know, and so, yeah, but doing, and a lot of time that fear will cripple you sometimes, right? It will. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've been in places like that where I've just been like, you know, do I believe in myself? Do I believe in that? Like, but you know what? Sometimes it's finding that person as well who just kind of goes, you know what? Just go to the people that you really like are kind of safe and trust, and I go, you know what, man, like you're gonna be okay. So yeah, so I do genuinely think it is action, and it's small actions. You know, I always say you can't eat an elephant whole. So you just gotta like, you know, and you can't climb a mountain in a day. Well, you can, but you know, it takes a minute. But you know, I just think it is about, you know, the greatest, anyone that's the greatest, you know, at anything, you know, they've taken small actions to get to where they want to get to.
I always sort of off the back of that say I think it's a cumulative effect of just being consistent all the time, and actually every now and then taking stock and actually looking back and reflecting on where you are and what you have achieved. Because so often with everything in life, there's this massive to-do list and there's this horizon vision place where we want to get to. And we're still always moving forward, but sometimes we just need to check back how far we've actually come. And that's a really, really beneficial, because the problem with that horizon vision that goes forward is it keeps on moving, because every time you've achieved something or, you know, ticked a box, then then the goalposts change, don't they? And you've got that next bit. So it's
celebrating the small wins as well. Like if you've got an amazing, and that win might not be, it might be not something that's significant to others, but it's significant to you. Maybe it's getting, your first track produced, or your first, I've written 10 tracks, and they're in a place where they're not where I want them to be, but at least I've achieved that part of it. And I think you can look back and go, oh, you know what? This idea was just like, there was nothing there at the beginning, but now there's something there. So, yeah.
For sure. No, having good people around you as well. Like first time we played Glastonbury, I couldn't get on stage. Like I was just like, nope. Nope. And it was just like, and like, luckily, like at the band, and it was like one of those where like Rubes, who sings in the band as well, was like, we belong here, mate. Let's just have it. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. But like, but it was definitely one of those where I was just like, nah, it's not for me, this. And and I was just like, Jesus, like, am I? And it's like, but like, it's real, like those internal voices which are like, ugh, what are you doing here? What's this? Like, do you even know? Like, yeah, absolutely. And like, and having that, but like having really good people around you is like huge. And who can like help push you through when like you start to wane a bit. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
Imposter syndrome is totally real, but actually the older I get, the more I realise like everyone's just winging it. So just wing it. Yeah, right.
I don't know what I'm doing with it.
Yeah, you get invited to an industry panel and you're like, but it's just, winging it as best as possible, really.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's just, I think, you're spot on. It is finding them people that are like, that do give you that courage. When you're at a place where you're not got courage and someone says, man, like, I've done that numerous times with artists. I've done, and there's things like with Alessi where, Alessi always had a conviction, but I said to her, you're going to be massive. You're going to be massive. I was like, I remember where I was when I said that to her. I was in London Bridge Station, and we were on the call, and I said, look, mate, just find the right person, the people who are going to support you, that you really, really deeply respect, but that care. And, I'm so proud of her. I'm so proud of her team to achieve what they've achieved in such a small amount of time. But yeah, it's just finding those people who will just lift you up at times that you are at a point where you're not. Yeah, it's so important. So important.
Can I ask you a question?
You can ask a question.
Convey what I was trying to get over. So, out of 3 panel members, would you say, can you give me 3 things that you would say throughout your career that you've seen in terms of ownership of life? In the words of David Bowie, it's a paraphrase of owning your own shit in more ways than one. Yeah, so to remain resilient and to keep propelling yourself forward, but also to protect yourself against like narcissistic people, people in the industry, like corporate sort of climber types, and then further than that, I'd say like enablers as well. So what would you say were 3 lessons that you would find?
I think the big thing is looking after you. Like, I think it's really easy to get caught in, look, I am a workaholic, and it's something I have to realise that is a problem for me. I lost my dad last year, and I was working 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. Not the wisest decision, if I'm being perfectly frank. And I lost myself. I did actually, and I'm only just getting it back because I think I forgot about me, and I was using the work to kind of mask the realities of what was happening in my life. But I think really looking after you, like, is hugely important. Like, whether that's by exercise, whether that's by doing other things that you're passionate about. I play paddle. Whether that's seeing friends, the people that you love, friends or family. If you don't have a great family, then, find good friends.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Yeah.
It's important because I think so many people don't realise like how easy it is to get to that place. And I think, you know, you just keep plodding. Like I've got a thing called survival. I just go into survival mode. And because you know, I don't come from the best. That is a mad alarm, man. A mad alarm. Yeah. And I don't actually come from like a normal family background. And I think, you know, I fought away from it. I just struck. I was like, no, I'm gonna fight through. It's important. I just don't do a me.
Obviously, like,
I think making sure you've got space and watching the grass grow, because I think that, you know, I've seen so many artists burn out. So many. You know, there's a really good book that my friend wrote, which is a touring manual. And it's basically about keeping healthy on the road. And it's incredible. It's a really good book. And but I think, yeah, it's being able to have that space, I think, to create, and like making that space and being quite strong about making that space. Because if you don't make that space, then, you know, everyone else, you can start being taken chunks out by other people. And, you know, they're coming with goodness. Like it might be that the label's coming with goodness. We want to do this, we want to do that. But it's knowing, what are my boundaries? What do I need to do to be able to keep myself growing and creating? And sometimes saying no is the biggest action you can take, and going, no, I need to sit in my studio for like, or I need to sit in my room for like 3 days and just go and write, and not being scared of that, like, and saying that no. So yeah, but you probably know better than me.
No, not at all. That was lush. That was immense. No, like, yeah, just space is a huge thing. Like having some good space to like just be you, having some alone time. Like I take like, again, like now that I've been in it for a bit now, like I take the first Monday off of every month, like just to walk around, just to like go cinema, have a little swim, you know, or just lay on my sofa and do nothing and hammer Netflix. But I feel great. Like after like that first day of like not doing any, like I love music. I like it's everywhere. Like, but just to have like that break of just like, you know, me mate was talking about it, and he was just like, we've got to you know, you've got to remember how to play. And I was just like, yeah. Like the amount of times that I go into a studio and I'm like, right, we've got to do this, you've got to get this done, you've got that deadline, you've got this deadline, you've got to get this EP done, you've got to, and like having those days now where like, even now when I go into the studio, like I make sure that I put a few days around just for me to like dick about and just be like, I've made nothing. and then like walk out. But just like making sure that like you've got those days where you can just play. And yeah, exactly, and do stuff like that. And like, so, you know, in my month I'll have like that day off, but I'll also have days in the week where like I just pop into like studio, or I just write stuff, and it may go nowhere, it may go somewhere. And yeah, absolutely. So I think like that's really important, because it's so easy to get caught up, like as you were saying, like the amount of times where I've like got caught up, and it's easy to get caught up, especially like if like one of your tracks starts doing really well and you're like, rah, man, I've got all these streams, I've got all these numbers. And like, I'd say it's only like this year where I'm like, get a grip, man. It's like, it's all right. Yeah, that's not the most important thing. And like, always remember why you got into this. I think that's a huge thing. It's only recently where I was like, oh yeah, that's why I started making music. Not to chase clout or chase numbers, chase streams. But like, but yeah, I wanted to like write music because it was a way of me like, you know, making my head less busy. So So it's true. It's true. So yeah, like those, I'd say those kinds of things for me, like creatively, like making sure I've got a day off at the start of the month to do nothing, and then having a few days to just like play on like some instruments. And
I think play's really important, like, you know, playfulness.
Yeah.
Like, and the ideas that you get from playfulness, whether that's just playing an instrument or like drawing or whatever, like, you know, I think in life, like, you know, I became a workaholic, but, you know, then you don't have room for play, and that's not good for anyone. Like, it's just not healthy. Like, you gotta have that, like, you know, being able to have a laugh and like see light in things and see, you know, see abstract ideas and thoughts and, you know, that lateral thought that you kind of want to, you know, you want to kind of take down from the sky and kind of play with it basically. And I think, yeah, like play's really important.
I see a lot of artists putting a lot of pressure on themselves in a lot of different environments, and sometimes just to be frank, just overthinking it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have this when artists come into the studio, and then, you know, we're like, there's like a constant mixture of vision, a constant, like, you know, it's not all the time. Actually, the mix wasn't, all they're doing is now changing it. They're just fixating on something that actually wasn't necessary. So, you know, part of the role of our producers is to kind of zoom out a little bit for artists, especially we work with a lot of grassroots ones, so they don't have that management who can do that. But even we've got, we do these live sessions, and we do a shared release with the artists on the back end. And I mean, just the other day I had a conversation with one of them, and she was like, I don't want to put it out just yet, because I just know once I do it, then I've got to do the TikTok and I've got to do this and that, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, no, you don't have to do anything like that. Like, you can just let it be what it is. She was overthinking it to the point where she's crippled herself and talked herself out of doing it. And it's the same sometimes when people come into the studio and they might be upset about their performance or something like that, but actually it doesn't always have to be perfect. It might just be different. And I just, I don't know how you get out of that very introspective tunnel vision. But I think for artists, what I've witnessed is it's very important to try to have that sense of perspective over your work.
It's about knowing what's important, like, you know, what is important, because I think sometimes you can get locked into this head that, like, it's not important, like, that's really, really, really important, like that mix tweak is really important, but actually it isn't. It's about the feel of the song. It's about what you're trying to, like, make someone feel or make someone hear, or, like, you know, what you're trying to say is the thing that you're, you know, the lyrics that you've written. Like, people aren't going to get bothered by what the mix is like, you know. I mean, I love, you know, This Is It by Strokes, and it's, you know, not a great sounding record, but I love it, you know. And the mix on that's like, yeah, like, what, you know, it's not perfect, but that it doesn't matter, because it hits you, and that's the most important thing, is like being able to be like, okay, how does this make me feel? Like, what is that feeling that is I'm trying to make someone else feel, or what am I trying to deliver to the world? And I think that's more important than like a mix tweak.
Yeah. I just want to share as well something, because I'm a musician as well, and I'm a performer, and so I had a few gigs this summer, and I remember there's one gig that's like a really big deal. I was like, oh my God, this is such a big, I'm like supporting this person who's like someone that I really admire, I'm really like into this person. And then I had a festival, which I was like, oh, it's just like this festival, it's not that big a deal. But my performance at the festival, where I was like, oh, it's not that big a deal, was incredible. I was like, why did I not perform like that last week? And I think it's just remembering that you've got it in you, you know what you're doing, you know how to do it. You wouldn't be asked to be doing all these opportunities, you wouldn't be given all these other opportunities if you couldn't do it, if you didn't know how to do it. So it's about remembering, I can do this on a good day and a bad day. I know how to do this. I know how to do this, so that taking that pressure, like talking about pressure, like taking that pressure off of trusting yourself and knowing that I know how to do this, and know what I'm doing. So I just need to enjoy it. Because then when you're enjoying it, you enjoy the fact that you've done an amazing performance and then also you had a great time. So I think it's remembering that you know what you're doing and trusting yourself, especially when it feels like there's so many eyes on you and there's so much that you have to achieve that actually you're doing what you already know how to do. Any closing remarks? We're just about to wrap up. Yeah, we're just about to wrap up. Do you guys have any closing remarks, especially for a lot of our audience are embarking on their journeys? They're just starting out. They're starting to think about next steps. Do you have any advice in terms of helping them just stay the course? And we were talking about finding our niche, and that really just means being yourself and being true to yourself and being true to your individuality. What would your closing remarks be in terms of staying the course?
I think there's a few things that I think are always really valuable to kind of understand who you are, what you're trying to achieve. There's mood boarding, journaling. Both of them are hugely important. And, any ideas that come into your brain, just note them. Note them either on paper or on your phone, or voice note them. If you hear a melody, if you've got a melody in your head, voice note it. I know so many of my artists that I've managed that, it's like oodles and reams of melodies they've sang into their phone, or they've played guitar hooks into the phone or whatever it is. Artist's Way is a really good one, which is it's a book to kind of really understand who you are, what you're trying to achieve, and that can really kind of help you to kind of just understand your own voice. And then it's action. It's just small actions every day that kind of make you move towards where you want to achieve, where you want to move to. And I think they're all the things that are really important.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like what it's been mentioned here as well, and what I said before, which is just pursuing something passionately, but also being open to try new things and just taking all the opportunities that are available to you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Both those again. I'd say when you're making music, everything doesn't need to be a banger. You don't need to finish everything. Exactly. And it's okay. It's okay to fail. It's all right. So the amount of times where something doesn't come to fruition or something like that, and then when you get bigger, you can put it out as a fragment and oh yeah, dead arty. But for me, no one's gonna do what you're doing better than you. Yeah. So just remember that what you're trying to do at the moment, there's no one out there trying to do it like you. So I think that's the key. And nothing runs in a straight line. So it's exactly. It's okay to take a break as well. It's all right. And yeah, I just feel that be kind to yourselves as well. Yeah. That's the key.
And your voice, there isn't anyone else that's got your voice. And I mean voice not in just a vocal way, but I mean in the sense of what you're trying to say. You're an individual, right? So whatever you say is going to be something that's very different to someone else's perspective on the world. And remembering that, and I think that's it, is just remembering that what you're bringing out or what you're doing is yours. It's what you, and always be true to as you said at the beginning, is when someone said you're a tribute act. It's brutal but true. I love that, because sometimes people do become a tribute act. But really harnessing what it is about you and finding your flavour. What is your flavour? Enhancing your flavour, I think is really vital. Yeah.
I think there's also an element of as well, just like really as well learning your craft as well, and taking that time to really develop whatever element that is. Now, obviously, I can look at it for like my technicians, for instance. We're of the mindset at the studio that they don't want the tech to get in the way of the performance, so they need to know their craft. They need to know their equipment, because they don't want to, if people are paying you to, like, for your time, you can't let any of that get in the way unless it's unavoidable. And so it's really honing in on those skills. So, and it's, if that means, if you're in the technical side of things, going and doing like loads and loads of live gigs and really getting to know that's great. Live is a great way to learn your craft as well, isn't it? Because you've got to think on your feet. You've got to correct things immediately. It's a healthy pressure. But learning your craft, I think, is also really at this point, isn't it? As well,
craft is important, but and I think that comes from action. If you do, and all the best people I've ever managed, some of them are lazy, some of them were not, some of them weren't lazy, but I think that some, all of them were really dedicated to the craft of what they were trying to achieve, and loved the process of writing, loved it, and would happily give up everything else for writing. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, all of you, for your incredible insights and everything that you shared. You're going to be hanging around for a bit after to chat to people. So if anyone was feeling a bit too shy to ask questions in front of everyone, our panellists will be here to have conversations with you and talk to you about all those burning questions that you have. But yeah, thank you so much.
No, thank you.